It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story. Protests tonight in Tel Aviv as the Israeli military reveals 3 hostages mistakenly killed in Gaza by Israel's defense forces had been holding a white flag.
This is a mistake. This is a tragic mistake. We were very transparent. We came out already with it last night. We'll learn our lessons and we'll keep fighting Hamas.
A Royal Navy destroyer shoots down a Houthi drone targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea. Rishi Sunak in Rome. The Prime Minister addresses a right-wing conference and warns that migration threatens to overwhelm European countries without tough action. The Premier League match between Bournemouth and Luton is abandoned when Luton defender Tom Lockyer collapsed on the pitch after suffering a cardiac arrest. Costing the earth a £120 green levy on new gas boilers to help pay for the transition to greener heat pump energy. An unlikely new West End production, Gwyneth Paltrow, the musical. And we will take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30. Good evening. The 3 hostages mistakenly killed by Israeli forces were holding a white flag. That's according to military officials in the country. The victims, who were all men in their 20s, were killed in Gaza City after being wrongly identified as a threat. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he is haunted by what he called the deaths of our children and said the entire country is heartbroken. Sky's international correspondent Alex Rossi reports.
As they stage their protest, there's disbelief at what has happened. Israelis are still trying to process this new tragedy. But there's also a deep vein of anger here at the government. They say the hostages are being left in mortal danger.
People have come from all over Israel to take part in this Time Is Running Out rally. Now we're hearing people shout out occasionally, make a deal now. And the message to the government is a simple one. They want the negotiations to release the hostages to be prioritized over any military objectives.
It has been 70 days since they were taken. And outside the IDF headquarters, families demanded the government act quickly.
The Israeli government needs to be active. They need to put an offer on the table, including prisoners with blood on their hands, and put the best offer on the table to get the hostages back alive. Alive. We don't want them back in bags.
Hear nothing about him. No one saw him, no one heard.
The relatives of those still being held captive feel trapped in a slow-motion nightmare. Yair Moses' 79-year-old father was kidnapped from kibbutz near Oz.
So it's 70 days, 10 weeks, exactly 10 weeks. This morning it was 10 weeks, full 10 weeks, that we don't know anything about him. So this is what we're shouting for a long time now, that the army activities are important, but they're not the way to release them, and they make them in danger. And this is what we realized. The soldiers are poor. They were doing whatever they can. They're doing their best, but it's not a soldier decision. It's a government decision that need to be changed.
And new details are emerging of how the 3 hostages were accidentally killed. An early IDF investigation has found the men were waving a white flag when the soldiers opened fire in northern Gaza.
It broke my heart, broke the entire nation's heart. And our hearts go to the families at this tough hour. At this difficult time, it's important for me to also send support to our warriors. They sacrificed their souls to achieve a crushing victory over our enemies and to return our abducted.
The trauma of October the 7th remains a source of constant pain here. In Hostage Square, they'll continue to hold vigils in the dark days ahead. and sing the nation's songs until all those still held captive in Gaza are brought back home. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Tel Aviv.
The U.S. military says an American warship has shot down 14 suspected attack drones launched by Yemen's Houthi rebels over the Red Sea. This comes after Britain announced a Royal Navy destroyer downed another drone that was targeting commercial ships. Our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle reports.
Almost the moment it arrived in the Red Sea to protect commercial shipping, HMS Diamond was in action, shooting down a suspected drone launched from Yemen. The Ministry of Defence released these photographs of the missiles being launched. It is the first time a British warship has destroyed an aerial target in anger since the 1991 Gulf War. Around the same time and in the same region, the USS Carney shot down 14 drones which also came out of Yemen.
HMS Diamond only made its way through the Suez Canal 2 days ago, so it's actually only been in the region for 48 hours, and already it's being involved using its Sea Viper missiles to shoot down these drones. Now, we can expect to see an escalation in the conflict.
The Iranian-backed Houthis have been targeting commercial shipping in the Red Sea for weeks. This was a video filmed by them as they boarded a ship by helicopter and took the crew hostage. It is in response to Israel's invasion of Gaza, and the group says they won't stop the attacks. 1/6 of the world's shipping passes through the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. Yesterday, 2 of the world's biggest shipping lines, Maersk and Hapag-Lloyd, suspended operations in the Red Sea because of the threat of attack. It will have a significant impact on global trade.
This is a significant decision because it could add between 6 and 14 days to the vessel's sailing time. It has implications in terms of the time at which goods will arrive at market, and it will have some cost implications for the shipping industry, but also for consumers.
The US Navy has had a ship in the Red Sea for a few months, and a French warship is now also in the region. But these attacks could force the US and allies to hit Iranian targets in Iraq, Syria or Yemen to restore deterrence and get a grip on the Houthis, who are growing in confidence and daring. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Israel.
And Alex Rossi joins me now from Jerusalem. Alex, going back to the issue of the hostages who were killed, how damaging do you think these killings have been for the confidence of Israelis, both in the IDF and the war effort?
Well, it clearly has been an enormously painful episode for the nation. These hostages have been inside Gaza for 70 days. They survived in captivity. They managed to escape or were freed. But anyway, they were trying to head to the safety of IDF soldiers. They were waving a white flag. They were shirtless to try and, the IDF thinks, to show that they didn't have explosives. But unfortunately, that they were accidentally killed. So this is an enormously difficult time on top of what happened in October the 7th. The pain of that is immensely raw too. So has it shaken confidence in the IDF? Well, not in the soldiers. All of the families of the hostages I spoke to say that they still have faith in the IDF, and they feel for the soldiers involved, because they say they're doing an extremely difficult mission. Where the anger comes in really is directed at the government and the war cabinet, and it's about how this war is being prosecuted. They say that really the priority should be negotiating, even if that means handing over many prisoners who they describe as having, Palestinian prisoners who they describe as having blood on their hands. What needs to happen is there needs to be a ceasefire, there needs to be discussion, negotiations, and the hostages must be brought back home to Israel. Then, they say, the war part can start. But the longer the war goes on without that happening, the greater the chance is that you're going to see more incidents like we saw on Friday, in which hostages are accidentally killed. The longer the bombs are dropped, the longer bullets are being fired, the greater the chances of harm coming to the hostages. And they say that cannot be allowed to happen. The big question, of course, is whether the government is listening. We heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu this evening, and he was saying, actually, it is because of the war, it is because of Hamas being degraded that they had the initial hostage negotiations in the first place. So it appears that he is not really taking on board the message that was put to him very strongly tonight by the families of the hostages who staged that big rally in Tel Aviv.
Alex Rossi with the latest from Jerusalem. Alex, thank you. Rishi Sunak has put illegal immigration at the top of the agenda during a speech in Rome today, saying that he wanted the UK to lead the conversation about reworking international asylum frameworks. The Prime Minister was addressing a right-wing Italian conference after what's been a tricky couple of weeks for him on migration policy back home, following the resignation of the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick. And it also comes after the latest figures from the Home Office show that nearly 300 people made the crossing in small boats across the Channel yesterday alone. This brings the total number of people arriving via the English Channel this year to 29,382. Now, this is compared to 45,195 people last year on this date. So some progress on one of Rishi Sunak's 5 key pledges: stopping the boats. Our political correspondent Rob Powell reports.
A hero's welcome in Rome after a bumpy week in Westminster. Greeting his close ally, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, this trip saw Rishi Sunak meet with her and the leader of Albania to discuss combating illegal migration.
Welcome, Rishi.
Boat crossings were also the focus for a speech at a right-wing conference in the Italian capital, the British Prime Minister adopting a noticeably spikier tone.
If we do not tackle this problem, the numbers will only grow. It will overwhelm our countries and our capacity to help those who actually need our help the most. It will destroy the public's faith, not just in us as politicians, but in our very systems of government. If that requires us to update our laws and lead an international conversation to amend post-war frameworks around asylum, then we must do that.
That's similar language to that of Suella Braverman, who also spoke of reforming international law on her own overseas visit in September. It's a point noted by allies of the former Home Secretary and welcomed by those who want the Prime Minister to go further on migration.
These treaties are from a different age, from the 1950s. And today we have, potentially hundreds of millions of people in poorer and more chaotic parts of the world who'd have a well-founded asylum claim in many of our countries. And we need to find a new way to deal with this.
Despite comfortably seeing off a rebellion here over his Rwanda asylum laws this week, Rishi Sunak is still facing calls from some backbenchers to take a tougher approach to illegal migration. His language in Rome will appeal to these MPs, but there is a risk that if he goes too far, he may lose support from the other wing of his party.
And he has a similar balancing act with voters. Tory constituencies like this one in Surrey are being targeted by the Lib Dems, with some put off by the government's policies on migration.
The cost of living is a far bigger issue. Yes, we've got to stop the boats, but I'm very anti the Rwandan policy. I think that's wrong. We're a compassionate country and there must be better ways of working with our partners in Europe.
I don't really know what the answer is, but I don't think what they're doing is right.
I don't think sending people to Rwanda is the right decision.
The right answer.
Leaders with similar challenges on migration, allegiances cemented abroad for a Prime Minister in need of friends back home. Rob Powell, Sky News in Westminster.
Let's bring you some breaking news now. 61 migrants, including women and children, have drowned following a shipwreck off the coast of Libya. That's according to the International Organization for Migration. Now, the group said on social media platform X, the boat carrying around 86 people departed the Libyan city of Zawara. The central Mediterranean continues to be one of the world's most dangerous migration routes. And we will, of course, bring you more on that story as we get it. Luton captain Tom Lockyer is responsive tonight after suffering a cardiac arrest and collapsing on the pitch during this afternoon's Premier League match at Bournemouth. The game was level at 1-1 when it was abandoned in the second half. The 29-year-old was stretchered off the field to a standing ovation from fans. It's the second time the defender has collapsed during a game this year. Sky's sports correspondent Rob Harris reports.
Tom Lockyer was playing the 15th match of his first season in the Premier League. We're not showing the agonising moment Luton's captain collapsed after 59 minutes. Luton and Bournemouth players called for help. Medics rushed on to treat the 29-year-old as fans from both teams watched on in anguish at Bournemouth's Vitality Stadium.
And it's one of those situations where we all just hope for the best.
They chanted the Welsh defender's name and applauded as he was carried off. The concern clear for Rob Edwards, Luton's tearful manager. The players, having left the pitch, returned to show their appreciation for the crowd as the match was abandoned. Once Lockyer was in hospital, Luton announced he'd suffered a cardiac arrest but had been responsive before being stretchered off.
The fans were, in that moment, praying for the best but fearing the worst, and thankfully Lockyer's alert, stable, responsive, and yes, on a day like today where no one really cares about the football, it's actually some comforting news.
It was Lockyer's second heart scare in a match in 7 months. After collapsing in the Championship final that secured Luton's promotion, surgery was required.
An atrial flutter, which is basically the heart, just irregular heartbeats. So it just wasn't responding how a heart should respond in them situations. And yeah, it's probably the least severe heart condition you could have.
Among those wishing him a speedy recovery tonight, former Bolton player Fabrice Muamba, who retired after a cardiac arrest at Tottenham in 2012. The heart of Denmark's Christian Eriksen also stopped beating at Euro 2020, but he had a type of pacemaker fitted and he's now playing for Manchester United. For now, Luton say Tom Lockyer is in a stable condition in hospital, undergoing tests, while Football Unite sending messages of support and affection. Rob Harris, Sky News.
A British boy found in France after going missing in 2017 has returned. In the last few minutes, police confirmed that Alex Batty landed at Heathrow. Alex, who's from Oldham, was 11 when he disappeared with his mother and grandfather during a family holiday to Spain 6 years ago. His grandmother, who is his legal guardian, says she can't wait to see him. Well, Sky's correspondent Alice Porter is here with me. So great news that it's been confirmed that he has landed at Heathrow. But what a mystery. Do we know what happened to him over the past 6 years?
I mean, this really is the moment that his grandmother has been waiting for. She was his legal guardian and hasn't seen him for 6 years since he disappeared on a family holiday back in 2017. In terms of what happened to him, we know that he was travelling around Spain, France, Morocco as well, leading quite an alternative nomadic lifestyle. But it's understood that when his mother, who wasn't his legal guardian, when she wanted to move to Finland, that's when it's understood that Alex Batty decided that he no longer wanted to live this kind of lifestyle and left the environment, the commune potentially that he was living in, and walked for 4 days and 4 nights through the Pyrenees and was discovered at 3 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday in and near Toulouse in southwest of France. And it was a driver who was going past who thought this seems very strange, offered to give him a lift, and there they had a conversation in his car and realised who Alex Batty was, and it then took him to the French authorities. And it's understood he's been in good health. There's no suggestion that he's been harmed at all during this time. He's had no schooling, though. So there's many questions, really, about what happened to him over the last 6 years. But we have heard today from Greater Manchester Police that he was taken by the French authorities and he was on a plane back to Heathrow today, and it's understood he will be reunited with his grandmother, who is his legal guardian. We can hear from Greater Manchester Police, who have issued this statement in the last half hour.
A huge interest in Alex's story, not least in Greater Manchester, but also nationally and internationally. It gives me great pleasure to say Alex has now made his safe return back to the UK after 6 years. Earlier today, Alex met with a family member alongside Greater Manchester Police officers at Toulouse Airport before heading back to the UK.
So that was Greater Manchester Police there giving that statement in the last half hour, saying the good news about Alex Batty's return. But of course, questions really remain as to what exactly happened over the last 6 years. And his mother is wanted for questioning because of his disappearance. But it's understood that she may have moved to Finland. So, of course, that will be quite tricky.
It will be. Alex Porter, thank you. Now, the cost of replacing a boiler could go up significantly next year, as manufacturers say they will increase prices to cover the cost of a government scheme which aims to boost a transition to clean energy. Companies who don't sell enough heat pumps will be fined from April, the clean heat market mechanism. But critics have described the price rises as a cynical attempt to boost profit margins. Sky correspondent Adele Robinson has this report.
The cost of heating is about to get more expensive, and this time it's boilers. John's on the front line, telling his customers next year new boilers may cost an extra £120. Hi.
Hi.
All because manufacturers are passing on the expense of moving to greener energy.
It is penalising people with the least money, because if people haven't got the money for a heat pump, which is a lot more expensive to have installed than a gas boiler, they're then having to pay another £120 on top. So, yet again, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer.
It's a levy being imposed by boiler companies to cover fines for not meeting targets they say are unrealistic on sales of greener heat pumps. Worcester Bosch, leading boiler manufacturer, says for each sale missed, they'd be charged £3,000, and this is about saving jobs.
We're applying this levy outside of any VAT or tax implications, so this is purely an additional cost on the boiler that we will not make profit from. We are purely and simply using that levy then to pay the fine that we believe we will have to pay next year. For the whole industry, it is a huge threat to our existence moving forward. We accept we have a responsibility to grow the market for heat pumps. Equally, the government has a responsibility to assist in growing that market.
But critics describe it as an attempt to increase profits while blaming the government.
If you look at the structure and the design of the policy that they seem to be pushing back against, it's highly improbable that they'll actually face any fines from April next year. If anything, they might face some fines from 2025 and beyond.
The government say no gas boiler price rise is needed and their targets are realistic. This is all about net zero targets and the divide between government and businesses over who should foot the bill for the transition to cleaner, greener energy. And customers aren't happy it's them.
Pretty annoyed, actually, livid, that they should be wanting to pass the whatever tax they're doing.
We are going to have to pay it, aren't we? But I don't think it's fair.
It's a deepening row over the price of green energy, with households bearing the brunt as costs rise. Adele Robinson, Sky News, Worcester.
A new musical based on Gwyneth Paltrow's skiing incident and subsequent trial is set to open in London. Retired optometrist Terry Sanderson took the actor to court earlier this year over a collision at a ski resort in Utah in 2016. Gwyneth Paltrow was ultimately cleared of all fault. Katie Spencer went to meet the cast.
Cast your mind back to the start of the year, and it was the court case that lifted the lid on a world of celebrity and privilege. Now, all of the drama of Oscar winner actress come well-being guru Gwyneth Paltrow being sued over a skiing accident has been turned into this rather camp play.
We are making fun of the circus around it and the fun that came out of it. You know, we're not here to comment on these two individuals who did actually have this happen to them. But I do think there's something to be said for just how gripped we are to specifically courtroom drama.
While the star clearly hated every second of this, pop culture positively devoured the spectacle, chiefly for how Gwyneth delivered meme-worthy moments like these.
Well, I lost half a day of skiing. Yes.
Right. Of course, it wasn't only what Gwyneth said, but what she wore that got people talking. Little details like the stealth wealth of her sweater, essential for the man playing her.
Taking someone like so famous and glamorous and, I mean, an Oscar-winning actress and Goop founding queen and put her like in a courtroom in Utah, I think just added to the ridiculousness of it and just made it so, I mean, captivating.
My life is shattered, I lost the case.
Packaging up popular culture moments, recognising there is a value when something goes viral, has given rise to the phenomenon that is quick turnaround theatre productions, as seen in the stage version of the Wagatha court case only recently.
There is no getting away from the ridiculousness of this. Optional snowballs and added extra. And in a world where the rich and famous present such polished views of themselves, the schadenfreude of all this is perhaps understandable.
The cameras in court allowed us to have a front row seat to the proceedings. Now producers say Gwyneth is welcome to one of her own at this show.
We're sold out on the first run, but hey, if she wants to come to the February run, she's more than welcome.
If she wants to come, she can be there any night. We'll welcome her.
Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Okay, let's get the latest sport now from Vishali.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Well, Stuart, it's been a few months now since the end of what was an incredible Ashes series. How are you adjusting now to life after playing cricket?
Yeah, really enjoying it. You know, I think ultimately finishing on my own terms was really important for me, and I knew that I wanted to finish by my last ball playing for England. England versus Australia was a major pinnacle for me in Ashes cricket, and it was such a exciting and exhilarating series that I almost got to the stage where I don't know if it gets any better than this, really. So yeah, it was great to be able to sort of make the decision on my own, finish on my own terms, and I don't think it will really properly hit me until the Test team play again, and Jimmy Anderson and Ben Stokes are walking out with an England cap on in their whites. I think that might sort of feel real, that I won't ever do that again. But no, at the moment I've got no regrets and feel really happy.
In the book you spoke about the fact that retirement only really came to you during the Old Trafford tests. So you came to a massive decision quite quickly.
Yeah, within 10 days, I think. So yeah, it was pretty stressful. You know, ultimately, anytime you walk away from something you love, it's really difficult. And I was loving playing cricket. I was loving working under Stokesy and Baz. It was great fun. I didn't feel much pressure. The communication was really good, and I was bowling really well and felt fit. So a lot of those things would say, carry on playing. And I honestly felt like I could do another couple of years, but I kept sort of bringing myself back to what's my next Everest, what's my next major challenge. I always need a challenge because I've got this goal to always continuously improve. I need something to charge towards and chase. And whenever I've written down in my whole career what's my next Everest, bang, within 30 seconds I've written down and I know what to target, and I just couldn't quite nail something down. So I think that ultimately told me that it was the right time to move and try something different.
Next Ashes 2 years away. Would that have felt too far when you were making that decision a few months ago?
No, I think I'd still be fit and fresh to play, but I know that a young family played a part as well. You know, Annabella's turning 1. The travel's a lot in international cricket, and the young years are so valuable. Ultimately, I'm 37. Next Ashes be 39, and although I still feel like I'd be able to play, I didn't want to sacrifice some sort of memories and special moments I could share with my family up until then. And because you have to dedicate your life to playing for England, you have to dedicate everything to it. And you know, I've done that for 17 years, and you know, it's time to still feel very focused on a career, but spend a bit more time at home.
And you bowed out in magical circumstances. Last ball you hit for 6. Last ball you bowled was a wicket, 150 wickets in Ashes cricket. What was it about that series that always tended to get the best from you?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it's, I grew up on Ashes cricket. My dad played in the Ashes in 86, 87, won it over in Australia. So, we talked about Ashes cricket in my household a lot, and I watched loads of it. And fortunately, I watched a lot of Australia winning, which grew my competitive spirit to wanting to play a part in the Ashes and win the Ashes. So, I think the team, the Australian culture, I enjoy playing against because it is.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
And that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the journalist and author Christina Patterson and barrister and broadcaster Andrew Ewan. Welcome both. Now, among the stories we'll be discussing, this on the front of the Mail on Sunday. Their headline, Rishi, illegal migrants will overwhelm the UK. We'll be right back.
Kingdom.
These last few years have seen some huge stories. And these stories have been driven by politics, by politicians, the people in power.
You must stay at home.
And it's my job to figure out how these decisions made by politicians impact all of us in our everyday lives.
This is the worst thing I've ever been through in my life.
People turn up here with their child stuff in a black sack and just say, I don't want to.
And that is what it is. It's first-class poverty.
Is this an example of the welfare state failing?
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world.
These are stories that affect us all. Millions of children are now having to catch up. Some stories have changed all of our lives. Because like the residents, the staff are being infected. Politicians, they make decisions all of the time, and it's our job to hold them to account.
I wonder if you will take this opportunity to apologise to those families.
But in the end, the real power doesn't actually lie with the politicians. The real power lies with the people. I'm Nick Martin. I'm the People and Politics correspondent at Sky News.
Five of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, let's take a look at our top stories. Protests in Tel Aviv as the Israeli military reveals 3 hostages mistakenly killed in Gaza by the IDF had been holding a white flag. Rishi Sunak addresses a right-wing conference in Rome and warns that migration threatens to overwhelm European countries. A standing ovation for Luton captain Tom Lockyer after he collapses on the pitch after a cardiac arrest and is stretchered off. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive in the next half hour. We'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Christina Patterson and the barrister and broadcaster Andrew Eborn. So let's see what is on some of those front pages. Well, the Mail on Sunday reports that the PM has warned that Britain faces being overwhelmed by illegal migration, which will, quote, destroy our democracy. Meanwhile, the Sunday Telegraph reports that hostile states are using migration to destabilize the West. The Foreign Secretary David Cameron has joined his German counterpart in calling for a sustainable Gaza ceasefire. That's the front of the Sunday Times. The Sunday Mirror splashes on Alex Batty's return to the UK following his ordeal in France. The Sunday People also leading with the British teenager's return after being missing for 6 years. 2 rugby players whose £9 million motor neuron disease campaign moved the British public are to be honoured in the King's New Year's Honours List. That's on the front of the Sunday Express. And the Daily Star on Sunday says 1 in 3 of us will flee our relatives over Christmas for some me time in the garden. But what happens if you don't have a garden? Anyway, a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the program, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch us. And as I mentioned, we are joined tonight by Christina Patterson and Andrew Eborn. Great to have you with us here. Okay, so let's start. Front page of the Sunday Times relating, of course, to the ongoing war between Israel and Hamas. And David Cameron, Lord Cameron, saying it's time for a sustainable Gaza ceasefire. And he sort of made this comment with his German counterpart. Christina, tell us more about the story and also what you make of it.
Well, this has obviously been very carefully orchestrated. There is clearly enormous alarm, particularly in the US and, I mean, frankly, in pretty much every country in the world. But the US and the UK were the only countries to veto in the latest UN call for a ceasefire. And it's obviously an incredibly complicated and difficult situation, but I don't think anyone can look at what's happening in Gaza and think this is a war that's being well conducted in a targeted way. I mean, for a start, 3 of the hostages have just been killed by Israeli forces. And my heart obviously goes out to the relatives of the hostages, but also to the Israeli forces. Can you imagine living with that? I mean, to be essentially massacring innocent civilians every day and then murdering your own hostages. How could you live with that? I think it's become clear that Netanyahu is not taking instructions for anyone, including the US, and his strategy seems to be for him to stay in power as long as possible, because that way he will avoid the corruption charges that are facing him. And it also seems to be that to target Hamas and coincidentally wipe out pretty much the whole of Gazan infrastructure and civilian population. So the whole thing is an absolute catastrophe. And what David Cameron and his German counterpart are doing are essentially saying, look, we've got to start looking at what happens later. It can't go on like this. We have to find a political solution.
Because, Andrew, there have been 2 developments, really. One was the interview with the Israeli ambassador to the UK, saying, though, something that other members of the Israeli government had said before, that there really isn't a 2-state solution that they're thinking about. And then Benjamin Netanyahu gave a news conference earlier today talking about how the country is heartbroken over the killing killing of the hostages. But I think the exact phrase he used was, this is an ongoing and it will be a long war. So it seems to be the opposite that many Western nations, as Christina was saying, are sort of asking for.
Oh, absolutely. And there's some really serious questions to be asked about Netanyahu, and people are sort of turning around and saying, look, this is what we have to do. And the statement is very, very clear. They say the sooner this happens, the ceasefire, the better. It is now a matter of absolute urgency. But certainly those questions will not go away. And I think Netanyahu and that whole sort of situation will be explored in much greater detail, and everything will come out, I'm sure.
Yeah. Let's go to the Sunday Telegraph now, front page there. Let's see if we can have a look at it. Prime Minister, hostile states using migration to destabilise the West. Obviously, we can see a very loved-up picture there of Rishi Sunak and Giorgia Meloni, who apparently are actually great friends.
Oh, good.
Well, there you go. Just as well. They have migration in common. They have a common challenge. And he was speaking at this far-right meeting in Rome and very much pushing, I guess, the common theme that they have of migration. What did you make of what he said and where he's saying it as well?
Well, I think it is interesting because he's ramping up the language. I mean, we always remember the 5-point plan for Rishi, and it's always about stopping the boats and so on and so forth. But this is a very strong affirmation, again, that we basically need to work together with this to try and sort this out. But the Asylum Convention needs that to be a revamp, is what he's saying, to stop the countries being overwhelmed. And this is a sort of common theme. The figures are alarming. And when you look at what was sort of promised at the beginning and the bringing migration down and so on and so forth. They're a way off that at the moment. And obviously an election is looming, it's no surprise to anybody. Certainly next year, it's either going to be in March or the autumn, is what I heard, and I'm sure you're hearing similar sort of things. But they need to get some sort of movement on this. So I think this is a ramping up of that language as sort of affirmation of that particular policy.
And Christina, let's just take a look at the Mail on Sunday, because it's the same story but a different front page. And again, Rishi Sunak, so Mail on Sunday, front page. Rishi, illegal migrants will overwhelm UK. And he made the issue about not just the UK, but Europe. And, language is crucial in a story like migration. And we shouldn't forget he is at a conference with a leader that not that long ago, because of her, roots in neo-fascism, etc., has used this sort of language. Yeah. So there's the issue of migration, and then there's the language around it that can be incendiary.
I think it's shocking, and he also describes Giorgia Meloni as centre-right. There is no way on God's earth that she is centre-right. She has been slightly less far-right than one might have guessed from her campaigning manifesto, but she is definitely not centre-right. As you say, her roots are in neo-fascism. And this is very, very dangerous language, particularly in the light of the fact that an asylum seeker killed himself on the Bibi Stockholm in the last couple of days, a doctor who was seeking safety in this country. I think it's a distraction for Rishi Sunak from the key issue, which is that since the Tories have had control of our borders post-Brexit, last year we had 740,000 net migrants. That's legal migration. So he's focusing on, I think we've had about 25,000 people who've come over on the boats. And of course, that is a serious situation. But let's sort out the 740,000, because if that's perceived as an issue, which apparently it is because they're making immigration pretty much the biggest issue. I don't think it is the biggest issue that British people are worrying about at the moment. I'm not saying it isn't an issue. And of course, as climate change has more of an impact, there will be many hundreds of thousands, if not millions, who will want to seek safety in the West, and who can blame them. But to present this as the biggest issue facing our country at the moment is just ridiculous.
OK, we've got 2 more minutes. Let's go to the Sunday Telegraph, another story from there about Keir Starmer. Starmer acted for extremist group in a bid to overturn ban. Andrew, talk us through this.
Well, it is interesting because basically, as a lawyer, you take on cases. It doesn't necessarily mean you support the cases that you take, but this has got a particular spin on this. They're saying that somebody who aspires to be Prime Minister, taking a case to defend in this particularly, they say it's frankly beyond the pale. I think that's missing the point about what lawyers do, where they're paid I'm a lawyer, we're paid mouthpieces. You work on that sort of basis, and everybody's entitled to a fair trial. So I think, whilst I appreciate it's on the front page, and you turn around and say it's an appalling case, nevertheless, as a lawyer, he took it.
Do you agree?
I do agree. I think that is a lawyer's job. I mean, we have a system of representation that when you go to court, you have a legal right to be represented. Imagine if everyone turned down particular people because they didn't like the sound of their beliefs or their crimes or their politics. It's just crazy. And as the piece goes on to say, a Labour source said to suggest the person who prosecuted the airline liquid bomb plotters is anything other than tough on terrorism is ridiculous. And he's right, or she's right. So yes, it's completely mad. It's like saying a doctor treated someone who didn't share their political views. It's completely mad.
Because the group in question is Hizb ut-Tahrir, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. OK. All right. Well, thank you both for that for the moment. We'll, of course, talk through more of the day's or tomorrow's stories. And coming up, we are going to be also looking at a story about the Royal Mail. And also, a Vatican criminal court convicts a cardinal and 9 others of embezzlement, fraud, and money laundering.
We found her name on his list, and Vera is here with us tonight. Hello, Vera.
Hello.
Now, I should tell you that you are, in fact, sitting next to Mr. Nicholas Winton.
Hello. Hello. Thank you.
Well, that's when my grandfather was meeting a lot of those children that he had rescued for the very first time, and somewhat ambushed by it, we should say as well, was not expecting it.
He was in the audience, in an auditorium, and they all stood up around him.
About a young
Exactly.
man.
They said, anyone whose life has been saved by Nicholas Winton, well, Nicky, please stand up. So my grandfather was living in London as a stockbroker, but in 1938 he travelled out to Prague, saw a huge amount of refugees that had escaped from the Sudetenland after Germany had invaded, saw them living in awful conditions. He decided something had to be done. People were already working to bring politically active people to safety who were in threat of the Nazis. And he said, I must do something for the children, and began to organise with others a large number of trains that brought children out to the UK.
I remember the Germans occupying Prague in March 1939. We had to tear a picture of the Czech president out of our school books and stick in a picture of Hitler. My mum was refused permission to leave at that point, but she got me on a Kindertransport train, and I can see her standing there on the platform at Prague Station, German soldiers with swastikas in the background, and off the train went. I was 6 years old, I was one of the youngest, and it took 24 hours to get to the Dutch border. The older ones cheered because we were out of reach of the Nazis. I was looking for windmills and wooden shoes, couldn't see any. And then we got to Hook of Holland, Harwich, and then to London.
Did you see your mum again?
Yes, she actually managed to, having been refused permission to leave and thrown down the stairs at this Gestapo office, she managed to get out at the last minute. So I did, yes.
I'm Martin Brunt, and I'm Sky's crime correspondent.
Looking forward to the undercover footage.
Welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, Christina Patterson and Andrew Eborn. Thank you both for staying with us. OK, let's go straight to The Telegraph. And there, Lib Dems call for scrutiny of the worrying Telegraph takeover. And that is, yes, because it's from the Gulf, basically, that could be. Christina, tell us what the story is.
Well, it's interesting that this is on the front page of the Telegraph, because I suspect what it really means is Telegraph calls for scrutiny of worrying acquisition of Telegraph, because all kinds of people have voiced their anxiety, including Lucy Fraser, the Culture Secretary, but including also a number of Telegraph journalists like Camilla Tominey, associate editor of The Telegraph, who is very worried about the implications for women. Essentially, the Vice President of the UAE is backing the fund that is set to take over the Telegraph. Yes. And of course, press freedom in the UAE is not the same as press freedom here. And the anxiety, the very well-founded anxiety, which has been voiced in this particular case by Jamie Stone, the Lib Dem spokesman on culture and media affairs, is that to have a British national paper owned by essentially by the UAE, who essentially dictate policy in their papers, would be a very worrying state of affairs, and I agree. I think
it would be Telegraph and The Spectator.
Yes, exactly.
And I think they rather prejudge it by saying it's worrying. I think every takeover from a media point of view needs to be scrutinised. You go through the usual sort of processes. But to prejudge it by saying it's worrying, I think is overstepping it. I think you're right to look at things and to question that in the appropriate way.
OK. Let's look at this story, still in the Sunday Telegraph. Pope's former advisor jailed in Vatican fraud trial of the century. Andrew.
It is quite extraordinary. It's the stuff of movies where this chap who was at one stage touted to be Pope, I think they were sort of looking at this thing. But basically, he's now been sentenced to 5.5 years in jail for embezzlement over the purchase of the former Harrods car showroom. So it's quite an extraordinary story. But it shows that nobody's above the law, even if you're protected in the appropriate way. But I think that's the sort of... it is, in fact, the fraud trial of the century, namely because of who's involved and that sort of side.
Yeah, Christina?
Utterly surreal, utterly surreal. It reminds me of, I think, Anthony Burgess used to write novels about what happened at the Vatican, and yes. you literally couldn't make it up. But the idea that these people are regarded as sort of spokespeople for God, well, certainly the Pope is, it's just breathtaking, really.
All right, let's go to the Sunday Times now. Front page again. About the Royal Mail, undercover footage shows Royal Mail is leaving letters on the shelf. I've just mailed all my Christmas cards, so I'm particularly outraged by this. Well, why are they leaving the letters on the shelf?
They haven't got time to do it. But what you should do is follow the advice in the cartoon now, which is actually, if you see the cartoon, what they've done, they've posted their Christmas cards in a big package. So you can then turn around and you'll get them delivered in that particular way.
That's a lot of wrapping, though.
It's a lot of wrapping. But what a delightful surprise when it arrives, and how disappointing when you open it up.
It is disappointing, though. I mean, because joking aside, a lot of people will send Christmas cards, and a lot of people still do it. It's sort of fallen out of fashion.
I think it's shocking. I regard it as a kind of a fundamental duty to spend hours and hours every Christmas working my way through my Christmas card list, handwriting in my illegible handwriting little messages to everybody. And then you go to the post office, you buy your stamps, £1.25 each for a first-class stamp. Then I went to my local post box, which had, I think, until last week said final delivery 5 p.m. Suddenly it's saying last delivery 9 a.m. And you're thinking, hang on, you're putting the price up. You're having kind of deliveries about once every 6 years, and you're not even delivering them when they are picked up from the post box. So I think we're all being swindled, essentially. I understand that the Royal Mail is under intense competition from couriers and obviously most of all digital communications. But I do think they really need to up their game. They're providing a shocking service.
Do you both send Christmas cards?
It is interesting, because a lot of people now are turning around and saying, well, rather than the £200 I spend, most of which is on postage rather than the card itself, they're going to make a donation to charity.
Yeah, but no...
And I think there's something special about receiving a card and a letter in the post written by hand, even if it's illegible.
Yeah, exactly. It's about the effort, isn't it? It's about sitting down and making an effort. Even if you haven't seen people for years, it shows that you're still thinking of them, that they have a little role in your head and heart. And I think it's one of those social niceties that's worth doing, but I resent the Royal Mail's part in it.
All right, let's finish with a picture of Elon Musk, front page of the Sunday Times. There he is with one of his 11 children, again at that meeting in Rome, where they were all talking about birth rates and plummeting birth rates, certainly in Italy, but really across Europe. Why did you pick this story?
Well, apart from the glorious picture, and it's slightly different about all the rest of the news. I mean, he's saying procreate like me. Well, having 11 children is pretty expensive unless you've got several billion in the bank and nannies and so on and so forth to look after them. It is interesting. But a lot of these 11 children have wonderful names. He has some with the artist Grimes, one of which I think his son is called X. And he says that his company was named after it because it worked on that sort of premise as well, which is why he renamed Twitter. One of the explanations is after his son.
After his son. Christina, what do you make of that procreate like me line?
He's nuts, isn't he? He's basically nuts. Obviously extremely rich, bit of a mad genius thing going on, bit of a fascist thing going on as well, it seems, bit of an anti-Semitic thing going on. So I don't think I would particularly relish being Elon Musk's child.
Christina, Andrew, we're going to leave it there for now, but we will, of course, see you again at 11:30. Now let's take a look at the weather.